Can you guys see me yet? I got to get used to how this starts out here. Okay, I see myself now. Welcome, everybody. I got to figure out better timing of how this starts with this time delay. Welcome, everybody. I got to figure out better timing of how this starts with this time delay. Okay, I shut off the iPad in the background to see if it was actually working, so it looks like we are. Thanks, Steve, for letting me know. I'll get better at this part here. Hey, today I want to go over just a couple things, and mostly, again, these sessions are for questions and answers, so I'll be trying to monitor the comment section. So if you have a specific question, instead of if you're not talking to each other, please put some question marks or something in there. Hello from Australia again. Impressive. Hello there, Stephen. So earlier this week, I released a video. I don't know how many of you got a chance to see it, on how to make an Easter open tomb. In my opinion, it was a little bit late for Easter this year, but next year it will be good. And I'm doing two versions of that video. The first one was on how to design, build, and cut that diagram from using a CNC. And the one I'm working on today and tomorrow will be how to take that file from your CNC from vCarve Pro and putting it into LightBurn for those of you that also have a laser. And I know there are several people that have asked me before that like to do both, and I address both in my channel. And so I thought I would do the same project from two aspects. I have mentioned before in questions that I usually design in Vectric because that's the one I'm most comfortable with the most number of years. Although sometimes I will design in LightBurn, I usually design in Vectric and take my file and my design into LightBurn, and then I make the adjustments for the laser and for the thinner material typically. So I see I got a question down here that says, not a technical question, but I'd like to see your process for the tracing and such, maybe in an outtake video. Actually, Kurt, I plan on doing that in this if we don't have more questions. Somebody else, Joe, a friend of mine on Instagram, asked me if I could do a separate video, and I may do a separate video, but I think I could cover enough of it here to give you a good feel for that. So we may do that here in a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to say was, were there any specific questions about the video that people wanted to see? I think the important thing to remember when you're designing these items is it's always a trial and error, especially in the areas of the slots. In this video, in this project, I decided to use the V-bit to go ahead and put in the various design aspects. You could have used other things, like you could have used a texture toolpath on the rocks or something else, but I didn't go to that extent at this time. There's so many possibilities that are available to all of us if we want to just let our mind wander and get our imagination going. Excuse me, get our imagination going. Let me get a drink of water here. So with that, since I don't really have any questions on the project, which is what I opened it up, I did want to address the part that Kurt talked about here and somebody else had asked me about was going through the tracing process. So I'll go through that. But before I do, you may all remember how flustered I got last week if you were on my show. And I think the people I see in this, at least in this comment section, were here last week when all of a sudden my power went out and I couldn't figure out why in the heck it happened. Well, I think many of you know, or some of you know, that I live in a multi-generational house with 4 grandkids and my daughter and my daughter's husband. And this is just for interest's sake. And when I started the live, I had tried to kick them out of the area and told them to go down into my bedroom or my living room that we have for the in-law suite and watch TV down there. Well, they were down there, and it so happens that that power is connected to this power up in my office. Don't ask me why that happened, but that's what happened in the remodel. And when I started searching out, I kept finding the breaker trip, couldn't figure it out. And then I found this. Let me show you. I don't know how well you can see that on the screen, but that's an electrical plug with a pile of water. So one of the kids had basically spilled a whole glass of water on this plug, and that's what had tripped it out. So you never know what's going to get you. But it's got me thinking about getting a power strip and a UPS based on some conversations I had with Jim Matthews. So I'm in the process of getting that for future incidents if they happen. When you live with a bunch of kids, you never know what's going to happen. So with that, let's me change over to the screen where I have my vCarve software up there. So in this screen, you can see my vCarve software, and this was the design that I used for the video that I made. And there are 2 screens or 2 sheets. If you go down to the sheets, you'll see I have 2 sheets that I made. One was the design sheet and one was the cut sheet. And the concept was the cut sheet was the one that I would change out or move around if I needed to, if I ever needed to change the design in the future. The design sheet was supposed to be like the master sheet for me. And so I would drag, actually I wouldn't drag, what I would do is I would select all of these vectors, and let me make another sheet here. I'm going to make a, so I could do the designing on it too. I'm going to add a new sheet. And I don't care what it's called. It's sheet 1. And I'm going to expose everything on the design sheet. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to include the bitmap in this case and across. And I'm going to, while I'm on this sheet, to select everything, I can do it a number of different ways. One is I can take my mouse and go across everything like that, which I think we're aware of. The other way I can do it is simply hit Control A. And if I hit Control A, it will grab all of the vectors that are on the active sheet. So that's one shortcut. Now what I'm going to do, if I wanted to take these and then put them all over on this design sheet, what I could do is I could copy it to the design sheet, or in this case, because I added the extra sheet, I'm going to say sheet 1, which is the sheet that I just added. And you can see that's over here. So now you can see I've got sheet 1. And what I want to do, first thing is, if I were doing a cut sheet, I would want to, if I was doing a cut sheet, what I would want to do is I would want to make sure that I could do all of these vectors separately. And so one of the things I think is interesting, and I'm not sure everybody knows about it, so I'll share it real quick here. I didn't share it in the video that I recall, is I'm going to take each of these pieces. So this is one piece. This is a small boulder that the door slips over. I'm just going to put it over here. I'm going to take this piece, which is grouped with too many other things. So I'm going to ungroup this one here for a second. Ungroup by Control U or Command U if you're using a Mac. And I want to make sure it gets this piece over here too. So get over here and group it. So G for group. Then I taking this one here, it's not grouped with anything, so I'm going to put it over here somewhere. And this one, what I'm trying to do is make all of these separate pieces. So to get these to arrange on your sheet the way you want to, I'm going to have to make this design sheet or this cut sheet a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make this sheet big as I did the cut sheet up here, and I'm going to edit that. Hit edit, and I'm going to make this 23. And this was actually 0.48 by the time I got done with the latest design. Hit OK. And then what I can do to make it easier to put all this together is I can use the nesting tool. And I wasn't sure how many of you realized that you could use the nesting tool. To use the nesting tool, you're simply going to go and select all of the components. You're going to come down here to nesting. And then what you're going to do is you're going to set up your parameters. So I put a tool diameter. I was using a 1/8 inch bit. And then I had a clearance of 0.12. And for me, the way I was holding it down was with some clamps. So I put a 2 inch border gap. And then the rest of the stuff, I said it could rotate, allow parts to nest inside other parts. We don't want that to happen. And everything else looks good. And so I hit preview. And it says they may not fit in the selected boundary. And so in my case, they did before, so that wasn't a problem. So I'm going to hit preview again. And that's going to be good enough for me. And now I'm just going to move things around manually. But when I did it the first time, everything fit perfectly. But then I didn't have things sitting off the sheet at the time like I did this time. So that comes with being trying to respect everybody's time. And now you can see I've got all of the pieces on the sheet and ready to cut. So let me look at the comments and see if there's any questions or comments. So that's how I went about putting all the pieces on the sheet, was actually using the nesting tool. And I don't know how many people are familiar with the nesting tool, but it can come in real handy. So now with that said, I'm going to hit Control A now. I'm going to delete all of those. And I'm going to bring up the bitmap by coming up to the layer. I'm going to turn on the bitmap tool. And for some reason, it's not showing. So I'm going to come over here to this sheet. I'm going to select the bitmap. I'm going to hit copy to the sheet. 1. So now we're on the sheet. And if I was doing this design, what I would do is the first thing I would do is I'd come here and I'd select the bitmap. And then I would center that. And I can center it either with this right here, or I could have hit the F9 key. I should hit the F9 key. So I typically will just center it. And then I like to use the line tool almost exclusively, although sometimes I'll use the other tools. And I don't worry about being that accurate as I go through the process. So let's go through this, how I went about tracing this picture. So the first thing I did was I select the line tool and I just pick a point. Now let me close this first. First, I want to put a guide down here for me because I'm going to want all of these boulders to sit flat. And to make sure they do that, not knowing how straight the picture is or anything else, I put this guide right at the bottom and it will help me keep things flat. So now that I have that, I take this line tool and I start right here. Make sure snapping's on there. Start right here. I come up to a given point. I guess where this is going behind the girl. Now I do need to take off the I think it's the geometry one. Come over here. I'll get that later. Come around here. Notice I'm not getting overly concerned about whether it's right on the line at this time. Just kind of wherever there's a change. And now I'm going to take off the snapping over here for a second, just have free rein. You can see I'm not being real particular. I'm just kind of following the guideline here. Wherever I think there's going to need to be a curve or a change, that's kind of what I am selecting as my next point. And I'm just guesstimating what's behind this angel right here, because it's not really that critical because I don't need it to be exact. And now I'm going to go back and turn on the toggle. I mean the snapping, because I want to snap. And because I'm going to go in a slot, I kind of want to go straight down from that place right there. I'm going right here on this guide. And now that I'm on that guide, I'm going to hit the tab key, and that will give me, it will close the vector, as you can see. So now I have a closed vector, and I'll test that just to make sure. And so we've got a closed vector, and then I'll start on my next boulder. So my next boulder, I'm going to say, like I said, I want it flat, so I'm starting down here. I'm going to put the line tool there again, and I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to start right about here. It's going to come up to here. Let me turn off snapping again now that I'm going free form here. I'm going to go over here, 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 down here. Normally you have a backspace key you can use, but on my Mac, I don't have it. So I'm going to delete this line right here. I got distracted listening to the kids out there. Do this again real quick. Do the line. Like I said, on your Windows computers, you have a backspace key that you could just go back one step. I haven't found that on my Mac yet. And here's where I made the mistake before. And I'm going to have the snapping back right there on the line. And then I'm going to hit the tab key. Okay, so now you see kind of the process I'm going through. I'm not going to make you go through every single one, but I've got two mountains. Now, there is another tool that I use quite often. It works even better with a tablet, you know, a writing tablet, but it works good here, and that's called the freeform tool, and that's this one right here, freehand drawing. So let's go real quickly through an example of that. So I'm going to assume this rock comes right down here. I'm going to let me get the snapping on for a second. So I snap right here, let's say. And now I needed to turn the snapping off there. It's not going to work. So now I've got the snapping tool on, and you can adjust how it's moving with these tools over here and play with them. I'm going to come here on the line. There we go. And I'm holding my left mouse key down, and I'm just following along with it. And what I'm looking at is right behind the cursor, you see, I'm not sure how clear it's coming out, but you see a yellow circle. And so I'm watching my crosshairs, and that's the leading indicator. And then I just come along here like this. And I picked up my mouse and moved it so you saw a little loop happen there because I hit something on my desk. That stuff happens. Again, nothing is critical here because in the end, now I'm going to let go of my mouse. I'm going to hit the tab key and it'll come across and hit close. And now what we have is, if I select all of those, if everything did right, I should have, select all those vectors, I should have 3 closed vectors. And right now it says I have 2 and 1. So we will see which one got left open. Oh, over here, this one will have gotten left open because I restarted. So we'll get there again. Let me select it. So you can see it's open, hit, and I'll figure out where it's open in a second. So now that I've got those done, I'm going to click off there so I can get the fading down. The next thing I'm going to do is go about fixing the vectors. And the way I do that is I select the vector. I go into node mode by selecting that arrow right there or hitting the N key. Once I have that, the next thing I do is I will select all of the vectors, and I like to turn them into smooth vectors. And you can do that by either hitting the right mouse, select the vectors, and then I select them all and I hit S for smooth. And that should smooth them. And so one of the things that I shouldn't have done is I should have not hit these 2 vectors. So I'm going to back out of that. Command Z, Control Z. I'm going to do this again. And I'm going to select all of the vectors. I'm going to hit the Shift key, and I'm going to unselect that vector, and I'm going to unselect this vector so that that doesn't happen. Now I hit S for smooth the vectors, and now you see all of them except for those are smooth. And now I just go around and I say, how does it fit? And you can see this one fits pretty good. All I have to do is take this little tail here and curve that down a little bit. I'm looking at everything else, and as far as I'm concerned, that, once I smoothed it, came out pretty good. So now I'll take the next vector and I'll do the same thing. I'll go ahead and select all the vectors. I'll hit S for smooth. Oh, before I do that, let me take and unselect this node and this node like I talked about before. And now I'll hit S for smooth. and all those vectors are smooth. Now I see it missed a couple up here. Not quite sure why it did, but we'll get those. We'll come over here, select them again, hit smooth. So they're all smooth. And now I go along and I say, how are we doing? Oh, look right here. This could use a little work. So I start to pull the vector down into that area, adjust the smoothing curves. I take one here and I turn this corner here a little bit, and I pull this out and turn this corner down a little bit. Pull this down in here, bring this over, bring this down, bring this down, and I just go back and forth, and pretty soon I have what I want. And I go through, and it looks pretty good to me there, and it comes down, and so that boulder's done now too. So the next one I did was this one here, and I'm going to, on this one, to try to find it easier, I'm going to turn off the bitmap for a second, and I'm going to figure out where it's open. But first thing I want to do is I want to straighten up where I goofed up here. So the easiest way in my mind to do that is to just take and delete this node where we had the overlap. And I'm going to turn this into a smooth node. And I'm going to smooth it out. And then I'll compare it against a picture in a little bit. Well, I just twisted it in a knot right there. So we've got that taken care of. And I want to hide these vectors so I can better see this line and hide this guide. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to add new layer, and I'm going to take them and put them there just temporarily. So now that I've got those over there, I can hide those and get those out of the way, and I can see that that tab key didn't work to bring it across. So the easy thing to do there is to come over here and take the line, turn the snap on, over here, right click, and of course that went on layer 1 when I did that. Now I'm going to go ahead, because I had layer 1 as active, and I'm going to check whether it's closed. I keep going up one too many. And it's open, so I hit close, and it should be closed now. Let's take a look. Nope, still closed, still open. So let me. For some reason, it didn't accept it. Let's go back one more time. Oh, it's going on the wrong layer. That's what's happening. So it was going on layer 1. So I separated it to this layer, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put it back on this small boulder, make that active, and we'll get it right this time. So now you can see it's right. Now we'll come up here and check that it's closed, select the vectors. it will be, I must be hitting that offset every time. All right, so we hit join, close, and now we have all the vectors that we wanted. And we would put those then on our various layers. So if I was doing it here, I would take layer 1 now, and I would take this, and I would move that to my big boulder. I'd take layer 2, and I'd move that to my medium boulder. And then I'd go through each of the various steps for each of those. And on the bitmap until I actually traced everything on here. And you can see how fast that happens. So that's how I go about doing my bitmap tracing. Now, does that answer the question that people have out there? Any questions or any follow-up questions about how to go about using the various tracing tools to get the design that you need? Okay, so it sounds like everybody's satisfied with that. So let's go ahead and cover, I guess, another topic then, kind of leading into the, if you have a laser and you have vCarve, and let's now say you've got this design in vCarve. So I'm going to get off this sheet here. I'm going to come over to my design sheet, which has all of my designs on it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the bitmap layer because I don't really care about that at this point because I have everything there. And this is kind of the intro or the start now for the video that I'm working on that I will release in the next couple days. Are you all interested in how you're going to take this design and move it into your laser LightBurn software? Is there any interest in doing that before I go down that path? Or is there something else somebody would like to cover? These live streams are to try to meet all of your needs, not necessarily my own. Just, can I get a thumbs up or something if somebody wants me to go through that process? Okay, so Ellen, you asked how I did the slots. I did not go through that just now because the question was about all about how I did the tracing, but I can do the slots, so I'll do that. Okay, so let me do the slots because that is an interesting process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and take these things that I just highlighted. I'm going to move those off to the side for a second. And I'm going to take and show you how I did the slots. Now, I know the slots are 0.48 inches wide because that's how thick the plywood is. I had measured it all out before. When I originally started this, it was going to be 0.75. But when I went out to the garage to look at the work that I was going to do, I found a 1/2 inch, and I didn't have to cut up a bunch of sheet goods. And so that was useful for me. And I thought it would look good anyway. And I was happy I did it because it did. So let's go through how I did the slots. Of course, this is the end result down here, but let's go through the process. So it's just a series of rectangles. And I'm not worried about putting fillets in the corners because the slots, the way I was using them, didn't require fillets. So let's start with a big boulder out here. I've selected this boulder and I'm going to come across and I want to take this boulder to the point where it's in the move area, that it's right locked in with the boulder it's going to hold. Then what I do is I go to the resize tool and I make sure that the link XY is off because I don't want to mess with the width. That's controlled by the boulder. Then I go to 0.48 inches because that's the width of the slot that I need for my project. Hit apply. So that gives me the very first slot that I need. So the next thing I do is I take this slot and I'm going to call this, I'm going to put this on, normally I'll put that on a layer called slots, but I'm going to put it on a layer. I'm going to put right click, move to a layer. I'm going to make it a new layer for this purposes. I'm going to call it slots 1. And I'm going to color that let's color that a dark green. And I'm going to make it the active layer. So everything goes on there. So now the next thing I want to do is make my next slot. So that first slot is for this first boulder. And the way I'm going to slot them is I'm going to put the boulders back to back to back. If you saw the picture. If not, let me know in the comments and I'll bring a picture up of the finished product there. So the next slot I need to do is the same width. So I'm going to duplicate that slot. Or what I can do is I can hit move and then I can hit the control option while I drag and it will create a copy. So now I'm going to take this one and I'm going to make sure that this is snapped right on top of the bottom line here. Now that I have that done, I'm going to take a guide and I'm going to drag it to this side of that next boulder that I'm slotting in there. And I'm going to drag it right over there. Then I'm going to take that guide and I'm going to move it to the other side of that same boulder. And I'm going to resize it so it snaps right on that guide. And now I have my next slot that I'm starting out with. And so then the next one I'm going to do is going to be off this rock right here. And so we're going to, once again, we're going to do the same thing here. We can copy it and then move it. And we could have hit the control key. Oh. Okay, we're going to copy it again. Hit the shift control. Bring it down right on top of the other one. And you can see it's not quite there. So snapped in, you see it snap right there. So that's good. So now we're right on top of that one. I've got the guide right here. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move it straight across. Take this guide, bring it over here. And if I hit the shift key, I should point that out. If you hold the shift key, then everything will move just how you want it. Now let's make sure that this didn't move because it looked to me like the slot actually moved. So I hit the move instead of the resize. So you got to watch for that. So here we go. Moving right along the vertical line. So now you can see it's lined up right there. Bring it back over here. It's lined up right there. And now we've got our next set of guides that we want. And I'm going to use 2 guides for this one. And I'll show you how I line it up here in a second. So this is the boulder. And I'm going to duplicate this boulder by hitting copy and then shift control. Shift control, now that's moving. And I'm going to move it just on the other side of the opening there. So the opening is right underneath there. So I want this boulder, move it over a little bit. I want this boulder to clear here so I can show an open tomb. So now that I know where it's got to slide to, the next thing I do is I put a guide right there. And once I have that guide right there, then I can make my next slot that will be for the rolling boulder to slide in front. So now that I have that, we're going to do the same thing we did before. Shift control, come down until it snaps on top. Well, sometimes if I don't hit it just exactly right, there we go, it's coming. Sometimes if I don't hit it just exactly right, I actually move it instead of copy and move. So again, make sure it's snapped on top of the other one. So now that it's snapped on top of the other one, we can adjust it. Come over here to that guide. Come over here to this guide. And now all of the slots should be lined up with their parent boulders. You can see the blue is with this one. The next one is with this boulder right here. The next one is with this boulder. And last but not least are the actual rolling rocks with this slot. Now I can see right now real quickly that when I was adjusting this slot, and so that's what I have to watch for all the time, is that somehow I don't move it versus expand it. All right, so now we have all of those slots that we need. And I'm going to take those and I'm going to move them down. I'm going to go ahead and move those down now over here. Let's see if I can blow this screen up a little bit better. I'm now going to get rid of these guides because they no longer are needed. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to put them in the node mode by hitting the N key, or I could have come over here. Now that they're in the node mode and they're on top of each other, I'm going to take those nodes and I'm just going to use my cursor key up just like that. So I got those moved. So now I'm going to do over here, grab those 2 nodes. Remember, I'm grabbing individual nodes, and I'm going to move those up. And then I'm going to take these 2 nodes, and I'm going to move those up. So now that I have all the nodes moved up, I can select everything, hit the N key again to get out of the node mode, and then I can hit the weld key. And now we have our slot for the boulders. I no longer need this extra slot here, this extra boulder. I get rid of that. And now I can go through and I can make the slots for the individual angels and women. And that's pretty straightforward. It's the same kind of process. I just need to make sure I put these women nice and parallel. So I usually use a guide for that. And this can be the part that's a little tricky sometimes, is getting this exactly parallel. And I'll just go through one right now. And you can see it's right on the guide, so it's parallel. And then what I do is I take the rectangle tool like I did before. I come around here. I match up right there. I make the height 0.48. Hit apply. And this now is my next slot. So I simply did that for each of the women. I simply did that same thing for each woman. Then I brought their respective slots down here and then turned them. And then I built a base around the slots. So the weld, so I wish I knew some of those tips a few weeks ago. Okay, good. All right, so let me catch up with the questions here. How did you do the slots, or did I miss that? I just was going through that. I wish I knew some of those tips a few weeks ago. Did a bitmap trace that took hours before I was satisfied with the result? Yeah, going through that and realizing just using the line tool and then using the smoothing, that works wonders. Oh, I missed how you finished it. Well, I haven't finished it yet, Ellen. It's still sitting in the garage without finish on it yet. So the weld option saved all the clips with the scissors. Yes. The weld option, in the video, I said I have a more efficient way to do it, but I didn't put it in the video because by then I'd already spent so much time on the video and that way would work. And I figured that would be an extra bonus, is to cover that in this live session and possibly in a separate video, is just go through using the nodes and weld options, because after I had to redo these from going from 0.75 inch wood to 0.48 inch plywood, that's when I realized I had done it the harder way. So yes, this is a lot easier. So Ellen, what do you do with the rounded corners? Your slots will have rounded corners. That is correct, but I'm only using a 1/8 inch bit or Aton asset. I'm only using a 1/8 inch bit. And so the radius of the corners is 1/16 of an inch. And therefore, I went ahead and did it that way to see if they would fit, and they did. And if they weren't going to fit, all I was going to do is take a little sandpaper on the edge of the pieces and put them on there. But they fit like a glove. And I was thinking that might be the case based on previous experience. If I was building a very strong or tight tolerance, a, a tight tolerance area where individual pieces had to go in the corners, I was real concerned about that. What I would have used, Aton, is what I think you're getting to, is I would have used fillets, and that's why I said that. What I did in the video is I'm not going to use fillets, and I'll see how they work. And if I need to change, I will. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If people don't understand what Aton and I are talking about, lots of times with the round slots, the center part here we're talking about, not the outside, you would want to go ahead and put in many times a fillet. And so you would use this fillet tool. And the one you would do for these kind of slots, you would say I had a 0.125 inch bit. And typically you would put in a dog bone fillet for those kind of slots. And you would go around and you would put your slots in the corner to make sure the only place you need them is where the wood's going to have to fit into a tight corner. And so typically I would have put the dog bone slots in there, but I thought I'd experiment with it first to see if they're needed, and they weren't, because I was willing to do a little sanding on the bottom edge if I wanted to, because I just didn't want those gaps in there, which is what you see when you do slotted joinery many times with the CNC. So as long as the vectors are interesting, I think you meant intersecting, right, Ellen? As long as the vectors are intersecting, if you use the weld tool, it will basically be like using the trim tool, but it does it all automatically as long as they're intersecting. And so that kind of relates to the earlier comment about Stephen, where he said he could have saved himself. I think it was him that somebody said I could have saved myself a lot of time using the scissors tool. That was you, Ellen. Yeah. So yeah, you could save that time by using the weld tool. And the only key there is that the vectors, for example, let me draw a couple vectors here, a couple boxes here. So if I have those two boxes there, hit close. Let me come over here for a second. If I have those two boxes, that Boolean operation tool, let me get this guide out of the way, it's bugging me. If I have these Boolean operations are very, very cool stuff. So for example, the weld tool, which is what I just used, what it's going to take is any vectors that are overlapping, it's going to take and move these out. Now, you could do that with the scissor tool, right? You could come in here and you could do that. And that would take two operations. Or the weld tool, you can take those two, select them, and then just hit one operation and it's done. So that's a pretty cool tool. Let me undo that. The other Boolean operation, which is pretty cool, is, and it matters with selection, is if you select this one first, and then you select this one, and you use a subtract tool, you can see it subtracted the second one from the first one. Or let's do it the other way, right? Order matters on this. Select this one first, and then select this one, and hit the subtraction Boolean, and it subtracted that one. So those Boolean tools are pretty cool. Let me hit one more. So the other Boolean tube that is handy is this one right here, which is the overlap, and it only keeps the overlaps between the two that are selected. And it did that because I hadn't selected any vectors yet. So on this one, I'll select both of them. And instead of selecting this side, or joining them together, it's only going to select where they're overlapped. Now, those are pretty cool tools. And that is very helpful. And as Eitan says, making them intersect ensures you won't end up with an open vector. And that's correct. So those are the Boolean operation tools, which are really cool. They're some of my favorite tools when I'm trying to do complex designs. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? I will have the, I see that Kurt had mentioned that he doesn't use LightBurn. I don't know how many others use LightBurn that would want to see me taking and showing the initial steps about how I get it into LightBurn. Or are there others with lasers that use LightBurns out there? Because I am going to do a video on it. It'll be released in the next couple days. Just finishing it up. I'm doing the cuts right now on the laser version of that open tune. Hopefully, if you wanted the, hopefully, I see one that Tim Keller says yes. Do you want to say a word on the kerf of the laser? Well, I can. you know, you have to measure the kerf on each laser has a different kerf. Obviously, that kerf is significantly smaller than what you're dealing with an 1/8 inch bit or a 16th inch bit. Mine happens to range about 0.1 millimeters in width. And so you have to take that into account when you're setting up your slots and cuts. And I'll mention that in the video that I released. But let me just show you how, for example, I'm just going to use this one right here, this version that I just did. I'm going to delete the parts that aren't part of the design. All of this extra stuff I just did on the fly. Let me delete those. So now the way you get this into LightBurn, or the way you can get it into other software, and the way when I do my downloads, when I offer the free downloads, so I have a free download that I offered with this kit. And so all you had to do was get my coupon code by listening to enough of me talking in there. And then you could go to my website, and I have this all in the description section, and you could get this project so that you could cut it on your own CNC or modify it as you want. So that's in that video description, and it's on my website. And there's a link straight to that download. I sell the download for $3, or if you want it free, just give me the coupon code from the video, which I put in text inside the video. So now the next one is going to be how to take this download and move it into LightBurn. So let me show you real quickly, just a quick, fast process. I'm not going to go through all the slides and everything. I mean, all the slots and stuff. But the way you take it into LightBurn is fairly straightforward. So you select all of these vectors, like I said, by putting a box around them or hitting Command A. And then the next thing you do is you go over to hit File, and you hit Export. And when you hit Export, you have several different versions. So this is for people that have other types of lasers, for say, people that can use PDFs. I know some use PDFs. I don't know what the Glowforge uses. Kurt, I think it uses PDFs, but other lasers use different types of files. I like the SVG, so I export an SVG, and I'll tell you why in just a second. I'll show you. So I like the SVG files because when, and I'm just going to put test here, so I know I can go delete that later. You can see where I did it before. Hit save, and now that's in that folder as an SVG. So the reason I like SVG files is, let me open this layers tab. By the way, do you guys know about the layers tab on the left? I'm sure some of you do, but if you're new to Vectric, you might not. This tab is actually a little bit cooler and more friendly than that top tab. And this is why. Because in this tab, after I do all of my arrangements, I like to go through here and order them in the way I like to see them. So in this tab, I can take, for example, this cross holder right here. And if I want, I can select it, and then I can move it up in the list or down in the list. So I can arrange these layers exactly how I want. So garbage layers that I won't really use, like I put down here. For example, I'm never going to use the bitmap except when I'm doing tracing. I can put that down at the bottom. But other layers I want at the top. So normally I would have put this cross. Say it was one of the later things I was going to cut. So I put it right next to the cross holder. So that's kind of cool about this layer list over here. So anyway, the reason I like to do an SVG is all of these layers will come with the file into whatever software you're using. So SVG files have layers with them. The other files don't have the layers. Oh, you have an epilogue. Okay. I like to save it in that way. So let me go open up LightBurn for a second. And this will be the last thing I cover with you guys because I want to respect your time. And it's been an hour and a half. It's been an hour now. And I try to keep them to an hour plus or minus 15 minutes. So now I've got LightBurn up and I'm going to start a new file. So it's already in a new file. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hit import and it's asking me what I want to import. And I'm going to go to, I think I put it in here. No. Okay, I put it in here. You see where it says Easter Tomb YT version test. So I'm going to open that up, hit open. And now I have the full design in here, but you see all these layers over here? Now I can play with those layers ahead of time because I know what goes with what. And normally I have everything grouped. So now if I want to set this up, what I would do is I would take these and I would move them around. And then any adjustments I need to make, I can make on these individual ones. And then when I get everything arranged, I can set up the layers. And so the first thing I'm going to do in this file is go make these slots that Ellen asked about before for the laser, because this wood is only going to be 1/4 inch material, not 1/2 inch material. So I'm going to have to adjust the slots. I'm also going to have to adjust these lips that I put on each of these things, because they're only going to go down in a 1/4 inch versus a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to slot my design in a different way. So that's giving you kind of an overview because this kind of slotting with a 1/4 inch, I think, will be a little bit sloppy. So I'm going to change the slotting slightly for the design in the laser, and that will be all covered in that video that I release in the next couple days. Okay, Kurt, you said you have a Glowforge. Yeah, I saw that. And I, for some reason, thought you had a Glowforge. You have an epilogue. Doesn't Bob have an epilogue also? I remember a couple people had the same kind of laser. Aton, did I know that? Yes, I know that Vectric has a laser module, and it's for lasers that attach to your gantry for your CNC. It is not for big CO2 lasers or diode lasers that that those of us that have separate lasers use. So if you have a JTEC or another laser that's connected to your CNC gantry, then you can use Vectric software. Otherwise, Vectric software doesn't do you any good for using lasers. Yeah, Bob has one too. All right, Michael has a Glowforge. Okay, it was Michael that has a Glowforge. Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for your time. Like I said, I like to respect your time. I say that I'll be an hour to an hour and 15 minutes or so, or 15 minutes on either side. Hopefully you all got something out of this, or at least a couple of you got stuff out of it. Are there any other last minute questions before I sign off? Now, I would appreciate it if you could give me comments and thumbs up and all that other stuff in the comments section when this video, this replay drops. That would be helpful, because I would be able to, I will be able to look at those and figure out what I need to do in the future. I'm still trying to judge whether there's enough interest for me to do these lives on a weekly basis, or whether I'm adding enough value. So it would be helpful if you let me know what you think so that I can decide. And Joe, I will be putting the laser out. Hopefully you were here in time to see me going into how I initially put it in the laser. My laser video, including how I make slots and everything else, will be out in the next couple days. I'm just working on the final touches of it. I'm making the cuts now in the laser because I fine-tuned it from my previous project. And so it will be readily available here in the next couple days. And just like I did with the Vectric or the CNC version, I will be making that file a free download for those that have the coupon code. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Joe. The discussion on bringing all of this into the laser will be in the replay. I think it'll drop tomorrow. I think the replays normally drop the next day or later tonight. So you could take a quick look at it, and you don't have to listen to the whole thing if all you're interested in is the laser. The laser part started about, I think about 5:15 or so, 5:20. So towards the end of the video, you just barely missed it. And if you just want to see how I get the information into the laser, you can rewatch it and see that, or you can wait for the other video to drop in a couple days. Your choice. Okay, folks, I'll say goodbye. Thank you for your time. And I'm trying to keep this, like I said, limited, but I'm also trying to keep it early enough so all you East Coasters don't have to be up all night. I don't know how you guys hang the way you do till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night on these things. I just can't hang that late. So have a great day and look forward to the next time we get a chance to meet. Take care.